All right, everybody. Hello, welcome to episode 3 of Finding the Resting Place. Today's theme is Darwin versus Design, Part 2. So, before we begin, let me share a little bit about myself. My name is Lucas. I am a teenager that started this podcast as a way to answer challenges, questions, and refutations regarding Christianity, and to provide non-denominational and unbiased viewpoints on some of the problems that confront today's Christianity, and to also show what the Bible truly says, stripped away of all doctrine and opinion. So, first off, today I'd like to thank everyone who commented on last week's video. Your comments mean a lot. They help spread the message, help spread the word, help get my videos viewed by other people, and especially to the people that have challenged me and disagreed with me. Thank you. Your comments proved to be very informational and led me to do a lot of research, so thank you. I learned a lot because of your comments, so in all honesty, thank you very much. It means a lot to me that you were willing to take the time to leave a comment. So I've got a few challenges today that I would like to respond to with the Bible and with logic and the science that I know to make my point. So, first off, I would like to thank my commenter. We'll call him or her M for the purpose of this video. I'd like to thank you for your correction on the distance of the Earth to the Sun. That was very informational, and I thank you for correcting me. That is a very important point. So, you are correct, and I do not deny it. I will not be in denial, because part of good science is when you are wrong, admitting that you are wrong. So I made a mistake last week, and I thank you for that correction. So the second part, I will read this word for word in order to answer it. So your second challenge was further back. It sounded like your entire argument was humans are smarter than animals, therefore God. And I'm sorry, but this is just a non sequitur. You never actually provided a logical chain that gets us from human smart to God exists, so I have no reason to accept that to be true. I understand your concern here, and I will clarify my statement. Humans being intelligent does not prove that God exists. After all, there are all sorts of animals that are intelligent. I mean, I have a cat. Every day that I watch her, she's clearly intelligent. Very smart creature. My neighbor has a dog. Every day that I watch his dog, he's clearly intelligent. Many animals that I encounter every day are intelligent. So clearly, intelligence is not just a human trait. What humans do have unique is that not only are we smarter than other animals, the Bible says that we are made in the image of God. So the point of the argument is not that because humans are smarter, God exists. It is that because of what we are and who we are, Christianity does not leave room for evolution for both to coexist. So, to be more detailed, we are made in the image of God. We bear His unique fingerprint in a way that no other animal does. And if that is true, we cannot have evolved from another animal because other animals do not bear the image of God. We represent a step up bigger than what evolution can provide. Evolution provides physical steps up. Evolution provides the ability for a creature, according to evolutionary theory, that a creature can start off as something simple and weak, and according to evolution, it can evolve, hence from a bacteria to whatever else. That may not be a real evolutionary tree, but what I'm saying is that evolution does not provide the intellectual leap. Evolution cannot explain how an ape that has minimal understanding of how to use a rock as a tool can evolve into a human that somehow has the concept of writing, of art, of literature, of sculpture, of science, of computers, of technology. No other animal comes even close to us. And that intellectual leap is explained by the Bible as our being made in the image of God. So my point is that whether or not evolution is true, Christianity and evolution cannot coexist. Either one must be true or the other. I hope that helps clarify that part. Your second challenge was, and even earlier, you referenced macro and microevolution as having differing levels of evidentiary support, then claimed that microevolution is heavily supported by research and studies, even though so-called macroevolution has just as much research and support. Either way, the terms micro and macroevolution are not, contrary to your claim, used by scientists. Those are labels post-rationally imposed by creationists. They're irrelevant terms because the biological and environmental mechanisms that you accepted as causing microevolution are the same exact mechanisms that cause macroevolution. Why you accept one without the other is beyond me. So, there are several challenges here that I will break down one by one. The first thing is that micro and macroevolution are terms that, while possibly not used by evolutionary scientists, are used by creationist scientists and therefore are perfectly legitimate terms. They are the terms that I know and understand. They are terms that fit the theories perfectly for explaining to others that do not have scientific prowess, to the layman, to use the scientific term for it. And creationists are just as much scientists as evolutionary biologists. So, for the purposes of these videos, I will use the terms micro and macroevolution to differentiate between the two because they are aptly descriptive terms and are far easier for me and for the average layman to understand than whatever evolutionists use. Also, the biological and environmental mechanisms that I accept as causing microevolution are supposedly the mechanisms that cause macroevolution. Now, this here is something that I would like to clarify on. So, as I stated before, microevolution, in my opinion, can also be called adaptation. It is taking a creature into a new environment different from one that it was in before, and that creature changes to adapt to its environment. For example, if a small beaked bird is taken out of an environment with readily available small fruits and soft-shelled nuts to eat, and is put in an environment where the only nuts that exist are hard, thick-shelled nuts, that creature will adapt and will grow a larger beak, and it will strengthen its jaw muscles, and as a result, it will be eventually different from the creature that was originally brought there. However, the key point here is that it is still the same creature. So, I will use my finches again for an example. A finch lives in an area where there are only soft-shelled nuts, but when water supply dries up, hard-shelled nuts are the only food available. So, over those generations that have to deal with the drought, the finches develop larger beaks, thicker jaw muscles, in order to crack the nuts. Macroevolution is the belief that these changes can be extended to infinity. So, macroevolution says that given enough time, that finch could eventually evolve into a completely different creature with continued strengthening of the jaw muscles, enlarging of the wings, or other evolutionary changes that might come about. The problem with this, and the reason why I feel it is so important to differentiate between the two, is that, one, no examples of this have ever been truly found in nature. No example has ever been found of a creature adapting so much to its environment that it becomes an entirely different species. What has been seen is this. Suppose you take a finch and put it in an area where it must fly higher, eat tougher food, and learn to grasp larger objects. Over time, that finch will most likely develop a larger wingspan, a thicker, stronger beak, and stronger talons. It eventually could adapt into something resembling an eagle. However, it is still a bird. This is observed all the time in nature, and it's a perfectly legitimate thing to happen according to Christianity. In the Bible, there are many instances where large numbers of animals have to be grouped together. For example, Noah's Ark. A lot of times people ask, well, how could Noah have gotten so many different kinds of animals on the ark? The answer is Noah didn't take one of the millions of kinds of beetles on the ark. He didn't take one of the hundreds of kinds of dogs on the ark. Noah took a dog, a cat, a couple different species of birds, a few different species of bugs. And then after the ark, the adaptation allowed these creatures to become the myriad of different species groups we see today among dogs, cats, birds. And the reason that macroevolution and microevolution are different is that a creature can only evolve or adapt based on what is in its genetic code. For example, a human cannot adapt to grow an extra pair of arms. Why? Because we lack the genetics for 4 arms. Humans are genetically coded for 2 arms. We can adapt to grow stronger arms. Humans have been seen adapting all the times. The different skin colors, different sizes, different heights. Some people are short. But all humans share the same basic characteristics of walking erect, having 2 legs, having 2 arms, having a head, having 2 eyes, and the like. Because those basic characteristics are what is allowed in our genetic code. A species cannot adapt beyond what is in its genetic code without mutations. And even after hundreds of years of forcing creatures to mutate, I know of no example where a mutated creature, gained an advantage because of that mutation. Anytime a mutation causes an advantage, it is less of a mutation than a repair. So to illustrate that example, take bacteria on a petri dish. If one of the bacteria develops a resistance to an antibody that is put into this dish, it is not because the bacteria evolved a resistance and added to its genetic code. The bacteria already had the resistance in its genetic code inactive or already had the parts for it. And the thing is that take a human with 6 fingers on a hand. That hand will most likely not function as well because humans are not meant to have 6 fingers. And if it does, humans already have fingers in our genetic code. We can add fingers, but they will not function as well, and it will always be a recessive mistake. Then that is another important point to make, is that there are dominant genes and there are recessive genes. And for the people out there who don't know what that means, every person has, for the most part, there are a few exceptions that are mostly meaningless to this, every person has, for the most part, 2 of each gene. You have 2 of the genes that make up your eye color, 2 of the genes that make up your skin color, 2 of the genes that determine how long your legs are, and all other sorts of things. Dominant genes are genes that only require 1 of your 2 sets of them to enact that trait. So for instance, to take pea plants can either have purple flowers or white flowers. Yellow flowers, white flowers. Yellow flowers is dominant in this example. So say that yellow flowers are dominant. If a pea plant has 1 gene for yellow flowers and 1 gene for white flowers, because the yellow flower gene is dominant, the pea plant will have yellow flowers. So an important thing to note is that most mutations are recessive. They require 2. Like the white flowers in our example, a pea plant will only have white flowers if it has 2 white genes. So most mutations are recessive, and therefore, even if beneficial, cannot be passed on to the next generation without the odds of another creature of the same species developing that exact same mutation at the same time and the two individuals breeding. So the odds of a beneficial mutation being passed on are virtually nil. And before that comes the impossibility of there being a beneficial mutation, which is something that has so far never been observed in science, to my knowledge. So microevolution cannot be extended to the infinite that macroevolution requires, because a creature can't evolve beyond its genetic code, because that would require mutations that are beneficial, and that does not exist. The next question was, and I quote, "Why would an all-powerful God need to finely tune a universe for us? Indeed, this entire idea is actually an argument against creationism, since an all-powerful God could cause us to exist in a universe regardless of its hostility or friendliness. All you're doing is pigeonholing God into a little box that he's too weak to get out of." So, something to note here. I stated that because the universe is finely tuned, it means that there is a designer. Regardless of how finely tuned the universe is, it is correct that God could cause life to exist in it. But the important thing to note here is that if life exists in a universe, then the universe is going to be finely tuned to that life. So, yes, the universe has to be finely tuned the way it is for us to exist in our current forms. But if the universe existed in a different way, then life would simply take different things. The laws of physics would be different. That universe would look very different from ours. But it is perfectly plausible to believe that a designer could put life in that universe. The important thing to note is that whatever the universe is, it will always be finely tuned to the life, because the life was created in the universe. And because a universe that does not have life in it that is finely tuned to it does not make sense. A very important repeating thing throughout the Bible is the law. God sets covenants. God gives laws. God sets down rules for his people to follow, dating all the way back to Adam and Eve. The first rule he made: do not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A universe that is irrational cannot have rational laws made in any way, shape, or form. And an irrational universe means one that is not governed by laws. So, if a universe doesn't have the law of gravity, or the law of electromagnetism, or some other law, if a universe is lacking the rational ability of cause and effect, the rational belief that one thing must follow another, then that universe does not make sense to even exist, designer or not, because the designer let me rephrase. God sets laws for us, and in order for those laws to have meaning, his universe must also be rational. Because without it, we lack the ability to gain understanding. If I hit a ball, that ball must go somewhere. It might not go very far. It might go straight down into the ground, but it still went somewhere. We cannot have knowledge if we cannot predict an outcome. If I cannot say with certainty that when I hit a ball it's going to go somewhere, then I can no longer have knowledge about the result of a ball being hit with a bat, because the world I live in is no longer rational. In order for a universe, for knowledge, for wisdom to have meaning in a universe, that universe must be rational. And God is a knowledgeable God. He is infinitely wise. He is omnipotent. He is omniscient. He is omnipresent. God wanted to give us his image. And therefore, God put us in a rational universe where we can have the value of knowledge. Because another important thing to note is that in a universe where knowledge is meaningless, it is impossible to know for certain whether or not a creator exists because knowledge is meaningless. So anything that you know means nothing. So our universe must be rational, otherwise we cannot make claims about it. And that's something important to remember, is that yes, God didn't have to make us a finely tuned universe. He didn't have to make it rational, but he did, because he has blessed us with his image and with the gifts of wisdom, knowledge, and intelligence, and he wants us to explore the universe. Isaac Newton put it the best. Science is attempting to read God's mind, to see what was he thinking when he created the universe. The universe shows evidence of design in its intricacy, because a universe developed by chance would not necessarily need to be rational. A universe developed by design from a loving God would be. Another important thing to note about this is irreducible complexity. Many of you have probably heard this term. If you have not, irreducible complexity simply means the inability to remove parts from a machine and to have it function. To illustrate, I will take the simple mousetrap. If you take a wooden board and set it out on your floor, I highly doubt that you're going to catch any mice. That mice don't just come and stand on a wooden board until you kill them. So you can't just place a wooden board and catch mice. Nor can you place a wooden board and a spring that simply is a spring attached to a wooden board and still will not catch mice. You must have all of the pieces of the mousetrap functioning together at the same time for the mousetrap to work. When Darwin first created evolutionism, the cell, to scientists of that day, all we understood about the cell was that it was there. As far as we knew, it could have simply just been a little ball full of cytoplasm. DNA hadn't even been discovered yet. Darwin was not even the first to suggest mutations as a path for evolution. That came long after his death. So, our understanding of the cell nowadays far outstrips anything Darwin ever would have seen. The cell is possibly the most complex piece of machinery ever seen. In the nucleus is DNA, where the genetic code that is what makes your physical body what it is completely contained, where in a space smaller than the eye can see, your DNA holds more information than the entire Library of Congress. There are parts of your cell that their job is to read this code, translate it into a similar but slightly different code that is then taken along a almost monorail resembling system in your cell to a factory where it is read, and the protein or amino acid or whatever is coded for by this DNA is then produced. Then it is taken to another part of the cell where it is finished, you could almost call it labeled, and then destined for a certain storage spot, or possibly even to be removed from the cell. Your cell works almost like an automated factory line, and cells have been working like this for millennia before Henry Ford invented the factory line. So, in and of itself, the cell is irreducibly complex. If you take out the molecule that reads the DNA and translates it, the chain between DNA and factory is lost, and now your ribosomes no longer know what they're supposed to produce. And soon the cell becomes a functionless, non-protein producing dead zone. The same with the ribosomes themselves. It doesn't matter whether the DNA is read if there's nowhere to take it, if nothing can produce the proteins. So your cell cannot have evolved and developed each part separately and slowly over millions of years. Your cell cannot be a simple organism, because without all of the parts of a cell, the cell ceases to function. And in fact, crazy as it sounds, the smaller the organism, the more advanced the cells tend to be. A human has cells for digestion, cells that transmit your blood, cells that carry oxygen, cells that do this, cells that do that. You have neurons, you have stem cells, you have muscle cells. We have all different types of cells. But a protist or a bacterium has one cell that has to get all of that done. It has to produce food, it has to catch food, it has to move, it has to digest the food, it has to carry the information, it has to think, all in one place. So cells actually get more advanced the smaller the creature is. So irreducible complexity makes it very difficult for someone to explain why cells could have evolved slowly if all of the pieces have to be there at once. The final thing that must be taken into account is DNA itself. DNA is possibly the most amazing molecule in existence. No matter who you are, what creature you are, what you look like, what you do, what part of the world you come from, your DNA is the same. Your DNA, not like identical, but still it has the same bases, the same backbone, the same coil structure, the same ability to be read by the rest of the cell. It functions the same. It is the manual, it is the rule book for existence. The interesting thing to note about this is that it can be spoken of like a book, or like a computer, like information. DNA is not just a molecule. It is a molecule that means something. To illustrate this point, if you were walking through the woods and you saw a series of random slashes carved on a tree, would those slashes mean anything to you? Unless you were the person who put them there, probably not. They are random slashes on a tree. But if you were to see the letters ADD carved on a tree, you would immediately read and go, oh, the word add. Why? To someone from Indonesia, the words or the letters ADD probably mean nothing. They just look like random slashes on a tree. But they mean something to us because we have given them meaning. Because using our intellect, our minds, we have given them meaning. This is an important thing to note about the cell, is that DNA does not inherently hold meaning just because of what it is. Because it carries information, we can apply information theory to it, which says that a message exists independent of the medium that carries it, which in simpler terms means a message exists regardless of how it is written as long as it has meaning to somebody. So DNA has meaning to the cell. It can be read, but what gave it that meaning? What reason is there? What by chance, if chemicals are mixed together in a pond, how does one of them all of a sudden acquire the characteristics of a message? If you spill Scrabble letters out on the table and you sift them around with your hands, what is there that gives them inherently meaning? I need you, when thinking of this, think outside of the box. Don't think, well, they're letters, they mean something. Think of just the tiles themselves with the letters stamped on them. Does that tile inherently have a meaning? Does that letter actually mean something outside of language? No, it's just ink printed on a tile. That's all it is. DNA is just bases linked together in a chain along a phosphate backbone. But our cells interpret them as meaning. Our cells read. Our cells see that as information. But the question remains, who put that information there? Why does it mean something? How, if evolution is true and life is just a product of random chance, how did we make the jump as living creatures from piles of chemicals to information containing life? How did we start off as simply chemicals mixed together in a warm little pond that somehow acquired meaning to each other and gained intelligence. If you come downstairs in the morning and find alphabet cereal spelling out your name and a message for you, would you think the cat knocked the cereal box over? Would you think that the cereal box simply fell off the pantry because of a wind and spelled out your name? Or would you think that your mother left it there for you? Or your wife? Or your husband? Someone left the message there. Someone gave it meaning. Because without a transcendent force to give it meaning, it means nothing. So, the conclusions to take away from this is that, one, most importantly, as a creationist or an evolutionist, regardless of your beliefs, if you are wrong about something, as I was last video, admit it. I made a mistake regarding the Earth, the distance of the Earth to the Sun. That is an important point. Do not fight with someone and be in denial simply because you wish to disagree with them. Whether or not you agree with someone does not make them a fool. I've had many very intelligent conversations with very intelligent people on both sides of the creationist and evolutionist debate because both sides are intelligent. Both sides are different ways of seeing the data. And it's important that on both sides, we do not allow ourselves to argue with the other side simply because they don't agree with us. So, first off, most important conclusion, remember to concede when you are incorrect. The second thing is that macroevolution and microevolution, regardless of what you want to call them, are importantly different because microevolution is seen even from the time that Darwin created evolution. We have seen animals adapt. We have seen species go extinct. We see adaptation around us everywhere. But we cannot simply say that creates macroevolution and that is evidence, because macroevolution requires microevolution to be extended past a point that it can be allowed to extend. You cannot extend something to infinity. We can only adapt within what is in our genetic code. If you take a human up to a negative 40 degree area, no amount of evolution, adaptation, or time will let that human survive. Eventually, the people that live there are going to die out, because humans are not made to survive in negative 400 degrees Fahrenheit areas. Negative 400 degrees is probably below absolute zero, but still, we are not made to survive such frigid temperatures. We can only adapt within what is in our genetic code. And while our genetic code is astonishingly flexible, it is amazing, all creatures were designed for a purpose. God built a wondrous, amazing machine that we call the universe. And therefore, there are limits to this machine. But not because the limits are on God. It is because God limited the universe. Because if we were limitless, if we were equal to God, then we would declare ourselves equal to God. An important thing to remember is that while our creation is limited and our view of creation is limited, God is not. He limits us to keep us humble, to make us remember that whatever we do, it can never be as good as His. He purposely makes the universe rational. He makes it so that we can have knowledge and have wisdom and have discernment, so that whenever we create something with knowledge or discernment, whenever we create technology, whenever we acquire wisdom, we must look up at the stars and say to our Maker, "You are greater than me." Just as a son cannot surpass his father in wisdom while he is still a boy, so we cannot surpass our Heavenly Father in wisdom while we remain within creation. I do not know what heaven is like. The Bible does not make very many direct statements on what it will be like up there. Do I know everything? No. Does anyone know everything? No. Why? Because God wanted to remind us of who is really in charge. He wanted us to see that whatever we accomplish, what He did was so much more amazing. Our technology can be directly compared to the universe. Biologists use engineering terms when speaking of the cell. Cosmologists use designer terms when speaking of the universe. It is as if we live in a ginormous machine, so intricate and so complex that we fail to even comprehend the staggering multitude of its amazingness. Because whenever we think that we've achieved the impossible, God is always going to be a step ahead of us. We finally look inside the cell, and what do we find? We find the most amazing, living, information-containing existence, the building block of life. We find it to be so much more than we ever expected. So thank you again for all of your comments. If you have more comments, questions, challenges, leave them below. I will do my best to answer them. That concludes today's session, and I will see you next week. Actually, I will not see you next week. I will see you 3 weeks from now. My next 2 Saturdays will be full, but I will return 3 weeks from now. So leave your comments, and I'll talk to you again next time on Finding the Resting Place.